Hey everyone, today, I'm bringing you real stories from ordinary people. People just like you and me, who lived through things they never should have experienced. People who stumbled into the unexplainable without ever looking for it, and walked away with one question burned into their minds. What the hell was that? But before we begin, you know the drill. Hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next episodes, because I've got a lot more stories lined up, some even creepier than these, and I don't want you to miss out. With that said, grab something warm, coffee, tea, whatever you like. Get comfy, bundle up if it's cold, because we're about to step into the darker side of reality. We're about to cross a threshold you might not want to come back from. Hope you enjoy. Some people have vivid dreams, so real that when they wake up, they can't tell if what they experienced actually happened or if it was all in their head. Others don't even remember their dreams. They just wake up with a vague feeling like they've been somewhere else but can't recall the details. But the guy in this story, he always had a weird, almost unsettling relationship with his dreams. It wasn't normal. It wasn't like what most people experience. Ever since he was a kid, around 6 years old, he was obsessed with the caves of Florida. And this wasn't just some typical childhood fascination with dinosaurs or astronauts. This was a magnetic pull, like something deep inside him was calling him, drawing him underground, into the darkness, into the earth. For 13 years, he explored countless caves. He squeezed through tight crevices, rappelled down dark pits, and he never felt afraid. And that's the weirdest part, because any normal person would feel at least a little apprehension, descending into absolute darkness, knowing there are tons of rock above your head, knowing one wrong move could be your last. But not him. For him, the underground was a second home, a place where he felt safe, at peace, until everything changed. It all started when he was around 7 or 8. Nightmares started repeating, at least twice a year, always identical, always the same structure, the same details, the same feelings. And here's the worst part. Even when he knew he was dreaming, even when he was aware it was just a dream, even when he tried to wake up or change what was happening, he couldn't. The script was always the same. He couldn't change it. He couldn't wake up. It was like being trapped in a movie that played over and over in his brain, with no escape, no way to change a single frame. The dream always started the same way. He'd fall asleep and appear inside a cave. But not just any cave, not like the ones he'd explored in real life. This one was different, sinister, wrong. It had a small opening in the floor, almost invisible, like someone had tried to hide it, like the ground itself was trying to conceal what lay beneath. And he, without being able to stop himself, would crawl inside. He'd squeeze through a passage about 10 to 12 feet long, with a ceiling so low it was barely 2 to 4 feet high. Picture this, crawling on your belly, the damp rock scraping your back, the smell of wet earth and minerals, absolute darkness, the heavy silence broken only by the sound of your own breathing. That claustrophobic feeling, trapped, unable to turn around or move freely. The sense that at any moment the ceiling could collapse and bury you alive. At the end, he'd always turn left, and around the corner, like a sign that something was wrong, there was a broken stop sign, not hung on the wall, not attached to the rock. It was lying on the ground, abandoned, like someone had ripped it down in anger and left it there as a silent warning. A message no one wanted to read, despite the terror flooding his body, despite every fiber of his being screaming at him to turn back, to get out, to run. He kept going. He'd round the corner, past the sign, and the passage would begin to spiral downward, opening into a massive vertical chamber. Huge, so big he couldn't see the bottom, so deep it seemed endless. And then, everything around him would blur, like reality itself was smearing, like the dream was entering a new, more intense, more terrifying phase. But some details were seared into his memory. Trash scattered along the walls, remnants of what looked like personal belongings, a kind of pit with a curved floor at the bottom, and in the distance, vague silhouettes, shapes that could have been animals, people, or something worse. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that didn't belong to this world. Something that had been waiting a long time. And among those shadows, he'd see his family, his father, his mother, his siblings, all of them in that place that shouldn't exist. And the creatures, those shadows, those presences moving in the dark, they would torture and kill them over and over in an endless cycle of suffering. He could only watch, paralyzed, unable to move a finger, unable to scream, unable to do anything to stop it. It was like he was condemned to watch his family suffer without being able to intervene, without being able to help them, without being able to save them. And then, after a few seconds, everything around him seemed to turn toward him. He didn't see it, he felt it. He felt those gazes, those presences, turning toward him, like they knew he was there, like they'd been waiting for him, like he was the real target of that whole macabre theater. Then he'd wake up, but it wasn't a normal waking. It wasn't like slowly drifting out of a dream, not like jolting upright after a nightmare, grateful it was just a dream. No, it was like being violently ejected, like he had no right to be there, like the dream itself was rejecting him, like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Those dreams repeated for years, obsessively, until he turned 15. He told a friend about them, and shortly after, something unsettling happened. Something that would change his life forever. One day, his dad, also a cave enthusiast, suggested they visit some new caves they hadn't explored yet. One of them was called Dog Drop. Know why it's called that? They say they found the body of a dog or coyote that had fallen into a hole and couldn't get out, trapped at the bottom, doomed to die of hunger and thirst, alone in the dark. The entrance was a 30-foot rappel. He went down with his brother while his dad waited up top, securing the ropes. At the bottom, everything seemed normal. The dampness, the stalactites, the heavy silence of the earth, the sound of dripping water. But then he noticed a passage leading deeper into the ground, and something didn't feel right. He couldn't say what, couldn't pinpoint it, but his instincts told him this wasn't just another tunnel. This was different, this was important. They kept moving forward, and the unease grew, like a cold hand gripping the back of your neck and not letting go, like an invisible pressure on your chest that makes it hard to breathe. Until suddenly, he saw it. The passage from his dream. The same curve, the same rock walls, and in the corner, bottles lying exactly as he'd seen them so many times in his nightmares. He froze, literally. His body went rigid, like a current of ice had shot through his veins. His heart was pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears, a deafening thump that made it impossible to think clearly. He was hit by a wave of terror, a primal, ancestral panic that made him nauseous and filled him with an overwhelming need to get out, to flee, to escape that place that shouldn't exist. His entire body screamed at him to run, that this place wasn't for him, that there was something there, waiting. He stood frozen, must have made some noise, because his brother turned and asked what was wrong. He could barely stammer that he wanted to leave, that he felt sick, that he needed out now. He climbed out as fast as he could, ignoring the scrapes and exhaustion, ignoring the ropes burning his hands, ignoring everything except putting distance between himself and that cave. His brother followed, confused, asking what happened, but he couldn't answer. They packed up and left without looking back. He never told anyone what he really saw. He just said he felt dizzy, that being underground had gotten to him, and soon the subject dropped. But the strangest part, the part that makes his blood run cold every time he remembers, is that from that day on, he never had that dream again. It had been part of his life for years, a constant presence in his subconscious. But it vanished completely. Like the nightmare had been fulfilled and didn't need to repeat anymore. Like it had served its purpose and could finally rest. And yet, he remembers everything with startling clarity, like it happened yesterday. Every detail is fresh, the damp rock, the sound of his footsteps, the broken stop sign on the ground, the silhouettes in the dark, and every time he thinks about it, he's flooded with an irrational fear, a deep panic he can't control, like something otherworldly had almost caught him in that cave, like he'd dodged a trap that had been set for him for years, like he'd come this close to crossing paths with something he was never meant to find. In 2002, the guy in this story was living in an old apartment, built in 1900. So when he moved in, the building was already over 100 years old. The walls breathed history, but not the kind you'd want to hear. These walls had seen a lot, witnessed many lives, and maybe many deaths too. The kitchen and living room were fine. They had natural light and felt cozy, with that rustic charm old places sometimes have. But the bathroom and bedroom gave him a really bad vibe, a feeling he couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. It was like a constant oppression, an invisible fog clinging to his skin, a weight in the air that wouldn't lift even in daylight. Every time he walked in, he felt like someone was watching him. Not a vague feeling, not just an impression. It was real, tangible, like invisible eyes boring into the back of his neck. Especially in the bedroom, if the closet door was left open, the feeling became unbearable. Literally, he'd have trouble breathing, like the air got thick, like there was something in the closet stealing the oxygen. Over time, he got somewhat used to it, but the unease never fully went away. There was always a voice in his head telling him something wasn't right, that this place wasn't safe, that he should leave. But sometimes life doesn't give you options. Sometimes you have to stay even when every part of you is screaming to run. One night, he was sleeping deeply when a massive bang shook his bedroom door. Not a soft knock, not like something bumped into it by accident. It was like someone had punched it with all their strength, like someone was desperate to get in, like something on the other side of that door was fighting to reach him. He woke up terrified, heart racing so fast he thought it might burst out of his chest. It took him a long time to gather the courage to get up, to face whatever had hit the door. He got out of bed with his heart pounding, legs shaking, and checked the whole apartment. Windows locked, chain on the front door still in place, no signs of forced entry, no one there. But the fear had already settled in his chest, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. I already mentioned the closet in the bedroom. He never liked looking inside, and he always kept it locked if possible, like the lock could keep whatever was inside at bay. For some reason he couldn't explain, he'd hear sounds in his head, like someone suffocating. Can you imagine? Being alone in your room and hearing, in your mind, the gasping of someone who can't breathe, the sound of a throat struggling for air but not getting it, the noise of someone slowly choking. That's why he avoided opening it at all costs, even during the day, even with the lights on. About a month or so after the bang, something even weirder happened, more disturbing. He was asleep again when he felt pressure on his body, like someone was holding him down, like an invisible force was pinning him to the bed. He couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. The room was dark and he couldn't see anything, but he knew someone was standing right next to him. He could feel their presence, their weight, their cold breath, their fixed attention on him. When he finally managed to turn on the lamp on the nightstand with superhuman effort, there was no one there. The room was empty, the walls bare, the closet closed. But the fear had already taken root deep in his soul. From that night on, he couldn't sleep without a light on. He always left the lamp on, because darkness had become his enemy, because he knew that in the dark, things move, things stalk, things wait. That episode left him completely wrecked, emotionally and psychologically. The feeling of being watched intensified, and even friends who visited noticed something off, something they couldn't explain but could feel in the air, especially in the bathroom where the atmosphere got dense and cold. Like there was an invisible presence watching from the mirror, from the walls, from the ceiling. It got to a point where the situation was so overwhelming that as soon as he could, he moved out. He packed his things and left without looking back, without saying goodbye, without explanations. He just wanted out, away from that place that had stolen his peace. After him, several people rented that apartment, but no one lasted more than a few months. There was always an excuse: plumbing issues, noises, or just not feeling comfortable. There was always a reason to leave. One day, talking to the building manager, he mentioned that he'd always felt the apartment was haunted, that there was something there, that it wasn't normal. The manager just laughed, like it was nonsense, like it was all in his head. But years later, when they were renovating, he decided to go back in. The manager was painting the walls, and the owner was there too. The room looked brighter, the atmosphere no longer so oppressive, maybe because they'd knocked down a wall and opened up the space, letting the light in. They chatted, and the owner casually mentioned that one of the former tenants had committed suicide in that closet, hanged himself. He also added that the architect who designed the building had lived in that very apartment and had also died there years earlier. Hearing that, he didn't feel anger or resentment, just relief. All his experiences were real. He wasn't crazy. It hadn't been his imagination. He finally understood the constant oppression, the cold, the voices in his head, the banging on the door. It was the echo of two violent deaths, trapped in the walls, like a recording playing over and over. When the grandparents bought the house for their big family of 10, a large house with multiple rooms and plenty of space, the grandfather found something strange. A false wall on the second floor, a wall that shouldn't be there, that didn't show up on the house plans. He decided to tear it down to gain more space, to expand the room, but behind it were children's clothes and toys scattered on the floor, like someone had fled that room in a hurry, like those kids' lives had been abruptly interrupted, with no time to take anything with them. Small clothes, kids' stuff, shoes, broken toys, all abandoned, all covered in dust, like it had been there for decades, waiting to be discovered. Creepy, right? But the worst was yet to come. My mom, says the narrator, says that when she lived there and was in her room, she'd hear strange noises, like something moving around her, brushing against the walls, a sound like tearing paper, but deeper, more sinister, like someone dragging something heavy. It scared her, a lot, but she didn't pay it too much attention back then, because kids tend to normalize weird stuff to find explanations for the inexplicable. When my mom moved out, her sister, my aunt, took over the same room, and she started noticing inexplicable things. For example, the photos she'd hang on the wall would appear in the morning on her chest, like someone had ripped them off the wall and placed them there while she slept. Picture this. You wake up and find a family photo on your chest, no idea how it got there, without hearing a thing during the night. That terrified her, and for good reason. Who, or what, was doing that? My cousins, who also spent time there, say that at night they'd hear footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow, heavy footsteps that always stopped right in front of their bedroom door. Footsteps that belonged to no one, that had no owner. No one ever came in, but it happened over and over, night after night, like a macabre routine, like something needed to be there, close to them. And the worst part? No one else in the house could have made that noise. Everyone else was asleep. Everyone else was in their rooms. Everyone else was just as confused as they were. Personally, I still don't go upstairs when I visit that house. It's always cold up there, even in summer, when the sun's blazing and the rest of the house is warm. But that second floor is always cold, like something's absorbing the heat, like winter has settled there permanently. And I feel a strange sensation, like being watched by something invisible, something I can't see, but I know is there. It's so intense that I prefer to avoid that floor, even as an adult, even knowing there's nothing rational to fear. Plus, I've started having terrifying dreams set in that house, always on the second floor. Dreams so vivid, so real, they leave a weight on your chest when you wake up. A lingering dread that even morning coffee can't shake. That house holds a secret, and honestly, I don't want to know what it is. Some mysteries are better left alone, better left undisturbed, better left unasked. "4 years ago, the narrator lived in a big country house that had been divided into 2 units. It had a pretty sinister name, a name that should have been a warning: the boys' home. At one point, it had been a facility for minors with behavioral issues, a place where kids were supposed to get help. But they shut it down after abuse allegations ruined their reputation and left a shadow over the place. At the time, he didn't think much of it, because the house looked old but cozy, with that rustic charm old places sometimes have. Stone walls, wooden beams. He lived there with his boyfriend and his 3-year-old daughter, Amelia. They thought it'd be a good place to raise her, away from city noise, surrounded by nature. Their bedroom had a big, sealed-up fireplace that covered an entire wall, painted over. It was huge, one of those old fireplaces you could stand inside. One weekend, he decided to rearrange the furniture, and he put the bed against the fireplace, using it as a headboard. It looked nice, rustic style. He really liked it. But that very night, around 1 a.m., he woke up to a faint little voice. "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." He sat up immediately, heart racing, and looked around, but didn't see anyone. Convinced it was his daughter Amelia trying to crawl into bed, like she sometimes did when she had nightmares, he reached over his boyfriend to grab her. He kept hearing the voice, but couldn't find her, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. His boyfriend woke up, turned on the light, and asked what he was doing. He explained that Amelia wanted to get in bed, that he'd heard her calling, but to his surprise, there was no one in the room. They went to the girls' room, and Amelia was sleeping peacefully in her crib, completely unaware, with her teddy bear and her calm little smile. He tried to forget the incident, blaming it on exhaustion or a hallucination, one of those tricks your mind plays when you're really tired. But the next night, at the exact same time, their dog started whimpering by the door like he wanted out, like something was bothering him. His boyfriend got up to let him out, and he was left alone. You know that feeling when someone sits down next to you on the bed, the mattress sinks, and you feel the warmth of a body close by? That's what he felt. He thought his boyfriend had come back, sat down on the bed, and he turned to look. But the bed was empty. At that exact moment, he felt the mattress rise back to its original position, like something had stood up and vanished, like the weight he'd felt was real, but the presence had disappeared. It was so real, he got goosebumps. He felt a cold that didn't come from outside, but from within, a cold that ran down his spine and settled in his chest. Not a physical cold, something deeper, a chill of the soul. The next morning, so shaken, he moved the bed to the other side of the room, away from the fireplace. He didn't want to feel that again, didn't want to hear that voice again. After that, for the 2 years they lived there, nothing else weird happened. Nothing, not once. But those 2 nights, he still remembers them with chills, like time hasn't passed, like he's still there, in that room, hearing that little voice. What was it? The ghost of some kid from the old facility, looking for their mother, or just his mind playing tricks, projecting fears into the dark. He's convinced the fireplace was the connection point to something that shouldn't be there, like a door that opened, and something came through. A few years ago, the narrator and his wife stayed at a beautiful hotel in downtown Pittsburgh, one of those places with tons of charm, high ceilings, antique furniture. It was there, after a fantastic dinner at an elegant restaurant, that he proposed. A happy moment, unforgettable, the kind you carry in your heart forever. But the hotel had something special, a massive Japanese-style soaking tub, so big that even he, at 6 feet 1 inch, could barely see over the edge. It was like a small pool, a luxury they hadn't expected. The first night they slept in a luxurious king-size bed, white sheets, fluffy pillows, in a gorgeous room with city views. Around 2 or 3 a.m., according to the alarm clock on the nightstand, he was woken by a strange sound to his left, very close. He clearly heard something that sounded like a pencil rolling slowly across a slanted surface. A dry, continuous noise, wood against wood, like something rolling in circles. It was so loud and clear, it put him on full alert. His heart raced, but he convinced himself it was just a pencil that had fallen off a desk. Nothing weird, something with an explanation. He calmed down and went back to sleep. In the morning, he got 2 surprises. First, there wasn't a single pencil in the room, only capped pens that couldn't make that sound. And second, there was no desk, not even a table to write on. And on top of that, he couldn't find any slanted surface for something to roll on. It was impossible. No way that sound could have happened naturally. The situation was so strange. They mentioned it at breakfast, nervous laughter. He doesn't believe in ghosts, but he's always been fascinated by finding something unexplainable, something that defies logic. He joked about the ghost pencil, but deep down, he was looking for a logical explanation, something that had let him sleep peacefully, but it didn't end there. That same night, he and his wife decided to relax in the tub. The water came up to their chins, and outside, it was freezing February weather, typical Pittsburgh, with biting wind and snow on the ground. They were splashing around, laughing, feeling like millionaires for a moment, when from the other room came a sound, a deep hum, like an old microphone connected to a PA system. That noise before an announcement, that sound old speaker systems made when they powered on. It filled the room and froze both of them, literally, ice cold. Their hearts jumped, and a second later, they nearly jumped out of their skin. They heard someone blow into the mic, testing it, like someone checking the sound before speaking. It was so clear and real, they could almost picture the person, imagine the technician adjusting the equipment. He jumped out of the tub, barely grabbing a towel, and said it was a man testing a microphone. His wife stayed in the tub, terrified, silent, not sure what to think. He searched the whole room, but found no speakers, no built-in grills, no device that could have made that sound. The only thing that could make noise was his phone's Bluetooth speaker, but it was off and disconnected. That story became part of their trip, an anecdote to tell. They were thrilled about the engagement, and I have to admit, that touch of mystery added a special charm to the stay. A week after getting back, he decided to email the hotel, asking about its history, the building, what it used to be. The answer left him stunned. The building had once been a telephone factory. I don't know why, but that info suddenly made everything click. The PA system sounds, the rolling noise, the atmosphere, they were echoes of that factory's past, its history trapped within its walls. Like time had folded in on itself and left behind a sonic imprint, a phantom recording that triggered under certain conditions,